Calde ulte solaune prte. Hello and welcome to finally part 2 of grammar for the Reef course. I'm sorry for the very long break, but now we are finally back with the first actual grammar, namely simple sentences, subject and object, and L&T. And don't worry if some of these words don't make sense to you now, we will explain them. So let's start right in, namely with the most simple sentence that possible, namely commands. Commands in English only need one singular word. Listen, leave, come. So those are commands. What you do is you just use the verb, so the action word, the word that describes an action, and that alone is enough to say a command. And in Natvi it works exactly the same. So run would be dul, leave would be hum, come would be zau, please help, rude srungsi. So here, like in English, we use the rude, the please, to make it a bit more nice, a bit more polite. Please repeat, rude lane. And here I wrote a second version, namely rude livain. Why did I do that? So the livain is actually just a lane, so it's the same verb, both come from lane to repeat. But there is an infix in there, so the if is a thing that you can put into verbs. This is something that you can do with commands, so I could also say tivul, hivom, zivau, srong sivi. So I could put the if in all of them and it would mean exactly the same. But you don't have to. That's the nice thing because, yeah, they're interchangeable, so the versions with the if and without the if. This is only in this case, by the way. So if has many other uses and in most cases you cannot just leave it out. But in this specific instance, you can just say the verb without the if and it's totally fine. So commands, you can just use the bare verb without any change to it. I just wanted to let you see this because many other people, of course, will use the if in commands because it is a possibility. So you might come across verbs with the if infix in this usage as a command. So I just wanted to show this to you so you're not, so you don't get confused when you see it. Just ignore it. It is in this case, it is just a command. You don't need to learn this yet. You don't need to know how to do this yet. You will learn that in a later grammar video when we will look at infixes. But for now, we want to keep it simple. So yeah, like in English, you can just say the verb to have a command. Now, let's put another word into a sentence. So now we get 2-word sentences consisting of a verb, as we said, a word that describes an action, and a noun or a pronoun. So words like house, animal, love could also be a noun, so the love. So basically, if you can put the in front of it, then usually it is a noun. Or better said, it can be used as a noun. Pronouns are words that stand in for other nouns. So for example, I, you, it. Those are pronouns. And in these cases that we will now look at, our sentence has a specific type of noun, namely a subject. The subject is the person or thing that is doing the action. We will look at an example and then it will become clearer. I run, oe dul, or dul oe. So here, I am the one running. So I am the so-called subject of the sentence. This basically subject is just a name for a specific role that a noun has in the sentence. In this case, the role being the person or thing that does the action. In simple sentences like this, of course, it doesn't really matter how you call it, but these terms will become a bit more important later when we look at slightly more complex sentences. But for now, let's look at some more examples. He runs, bo dul or dul bo. The dog runs, nantang chip dul or dul nantang chip. A cat runs, balukan chip dul or dul balukan chip. Yesterday I ran, tram oe dul. Oe tram dul or any other order would work. Tomorrow I will run, dul trai oe. Oe dul trai, or again any other order. I on purpose now did not tell you a lot about the grammar in these sentences, because I want you to take a look at it. Please pause this video, so really take a minute or two to think about this and write down which differences between English and Natvi can you spot. And of course the words are different, obviously, so I'm talking about grammar differences. What does Natvi do differently from English? Yeah, let's look at it. So first of all, flexible word order is probably the thing that you saw first. So oe tul and tul oe both translate to I run. So the word order doesn't matter in the sentence. And in principle, it doesn't matter in most simple sentences. Note that I say flexible word order, not free word order. And that has a reason, because the word order is not free. There are rules that will tell you where to place a word. But these rules are much more loose than they are in English. In such simple sentences, there are no rules at all, or all the grammar rules that exist don't talk about order. But when you continue through this grammar series, you will learn more and more grammar rules, and some of them will tell you where you have to place a word. Basically, if there is no rule about it, then you can place it wherever. Then there is no conjugation according to person. In English, we have to change the verb sometimes. I run, but he or she runs. So we add the S if we are talking about he or she or it. Other languages do this far more extreme. Like German actually is not that bad, but Italian, for example, has tons of conjugations for all different types of stuff. In Natvi, we don't really do this, so we definitely do not conjugate according to person. So it is always tul. Oe tul, I run. Po tul, he or she runs. There are no articles. So articles are these small words, the d and the a, which go in front of nouns. And yeah, they just don't exist in Natvi. Palukan chip tul could actually be translated as the cat runs or a cat runs. We usually just know from context which of the two is meant. Obviously, in such a grammar video, there is no context. I just give you random example sentences of things, and there is no surrounding context. So I just have to give you kind of a random translation out of the pool of possibilities. But keep in mind that in many, many cases, there are many other ways to translate a sentence, not only because there are no articles in Natvi, but also for other reasons, which we see now. Tense doesn't have to be indicated at the verb. Tense is when something happened. So, oe tul, I run. Oe tram tul, yesterday I ran. In English, we change the verb. I run, I ran. So the ran shows that it's in the past. In Natvi, we don't have to do this. We can do this. So Natvi has tense. Natvi can indicate at the verb when something happened, but we don't have to. In general, if from context is clear when an action happened, then we don't need to change the verb. This means two things. First of all, even as a total beginner, you can already write sentences about the past and the future just by putting it in the right context. For example, by putting an adverb into the sentence, tram, yesterday. That makes clear that it's in the past. But also, for example, if you are in a conversation with someone and you are talking about what you did yesterday, if that was already mentioned that you're talking about yesterday, then you can also just say, oh, oe tul, I ran. So oe tul, on the slide is translated as I run, but in the context of talking about yesterday, we could translate it as I ran. This also means, again, that there are many ways to translate something. Oe tul is here translated as I run, because there's no context. But in the right context, this simple sentence could also mean I am running, I will run, I did run. So it could mean all of these things depending on the right context. Again, I will usually give you one possible translation, but there are usually many other ways to translate a sentence. Context is really all that matters, but in grammar videos, there is usually no context. So these are the main differences between English and Natvi grammar in such a very simple sentence. This actually causes one problem, and I want you to think about which problem could this cause. One tip, look at the sentence, Neytiri hears Ninat. Again, please pause the video and try to think about it actively. What could the problem be and how could we solve this? I hope you're ready, because we will now talk about it. So, we talked about flexible word order. But in this English sentence, Neytiri hears Ninat, word order is telling us something about the meaning. I could change the sentence to Ninat hears Neytiri. It has exactly the same words, only the word order changed. But even though it has exactly the same words, the meaning changed because suddenly not Neytiri is hearing someone, but Ninat. If not, we now have flexible word order, and if that also applies to these kinds of sentences with 3 words, which it does, then, well, how do we now know who is the one hearing, so the subject, and who is the one being heard? That person we would call the direct object. And here comes our big grammar topic of the day, which is case endings. Natvi uses so-called case endings to show the role of a noun in a sentence. This is very important. It shows the role of a noun. So case endings, the one we talk about today, but also the ones we will talk about in future videos, only ever go onto nouns. Because that's the only thing they're there for. It's literally their only job to show what role a noun has in the sentence. So you will never put it on a verb, you will never put it on an adjective or anything else, only on nouns. There are in complete 5 case endings, but we will talk about 2 today, which kind of belong together. We will talk about the subject, which we already talked about, is the person or thing that does the action. Who is verbing? So in Neytiri, here's Ninat, who is the one hearing something or someone? That would be Neytiri. And then there is the direct object. Who is being verbed? Who is affected by the action? In the sentence, Neytiri hears Ninat, that would be Ninat, because she is being heard. So she is the direct object. For the subject, we have the L ending, and for the direct object, we have the T ending. Of course, it would be too simple to just slap an L or an T on a noun. So instead, the endings actually slightly change depending on how the noun looks like. Let's look at the L ending first. If a word ends in a vowel, that sounds like a, e, I, and so on, then we just put in an L. So nga, you, would change to ngal, if the nga is the subject of a sentence with a direct object. If a word ends in a consonant, or with a double L or a double R, then we put an il. This is just because that's simpler to pronounce. So we can't have a word ending with consonant plus just a simple L. So Natvi doesn't allow for double consonants at the end of a word. So we have to put a vowel in between. So moat would become moatil. Note that double L and the double R actually in Natvi are vowels. So we call them pseudo-vowels. But for case endings in general, they count as consonants. So they usually are grouped together with consonants there. Lastly, we have the group of diphthongs that act like consonants in this case. So kifgei becomes kifgeil. Diphthongs are the A, the I, the Au, and the Eu. Next, let's look at the T ending. Note, the table will look very complicated, but don't panic. I made it that because I wanted to be complete. But for the beginning, just ignore the bottom part. We will talk about it, and I promise you it is much simpler than it looks like. If you have a word ending with a vowel, then you put just a T or a T there. Note that Reef Natvi actually highly prefers the T, so it highly prefers to keep the E there. So nga would become ngati. It can also be ngat without the E there, but ngati is preferred. If you have a word ending with a consonant, or again a double L or double R, it can be either T or eat. Again, the T is preferred, so Reef Natvi really loves the T. In my example, however, I put the eat there, so moat would become moatit. The reason is because moat already ends with a T. We actually don't have a rule here, so we don't have anything official from Kaya Paul. We don't know if it's forbidden to put the T there, so maybe moati is actually correct. While Natvi usually doesn't have double consonants, we have seen examples where using pre and suffixes on words can cause double consonants. But yeah, we don't know for sure, and to be sure I would always put eat on a word that ends with a T. But in other examples, if a word ends with a consonant, Reef Natvi would usually prefer the T because they just love their T. Now, the last category is again our diphthongs, but this time you see I split it into the 4 diphthongs. For some reason, the diphthongs have very complicated rules, so the T ending plus diphthongs is literally different with every single diphthong. You can learn this by heart, but as a beginner, I wouldn't really recommend it. I would more save the slide for later reference if you're curious and want to learn it. But the good news is the T is always correct. So you can always just put TI there. So AT is correct, IT, EUT, and AUT. This is always correct. So in principle, you can just learn for the T ending, always use T, except if a word ends with a T already. Then it might be better to use eat instead. So now we have learned a lot of theory. Theory is boring, so let's go to the practice. Please try yourself to translate ne tiri hears ni nat. To hear would be staum. You can also look it up in the dictionary to see if you're spelling it correctly. So please pause the video and try to translate that sentence. I will now show you the solution. Ne tiri staum ni natit. Ne tiri is the one hearing someone, so ne tiri gets the L ending. So she becomes ne tiril. Staum is our verb. It doesn't get any ending because verbs never receive case endings. And then ni natit ends with a T and is the one being heard, so a direct object, so we put the eat there. This, of course, now is the English word order. But because the case endings show us everything we need to know, we can now change the word order. Ne tiril, ni natit, staum. Ni natit, staum, ne tiril. Ni natit, ne tiril, staum. And so on. So really all possible word orders are possible in such short sentences. Let's look at some more examples. I eat the fruit. Mau titi yom well. So I'm the one eating, so I get the L ending. The fruit gets the T ending because it's the thing being eaten. The insect follows me. Nong heangil weti. The insect is the one following, so heang changes to heangil. I am the one being followed, so oe changes to weti. Note that oe has two syllables. Oe, so there the O and the E are different syllables, but for weti, the we becomes one syllable. That is because as soon as we put a case ending on oe, we pronounce the oe as we. That is the reason that the oe, sometimes only the O is underlined, sometimes the oe is underlined together, because sometimes the oe just together is one syllable. The nantang chases a yerig. Nantangil fewi yerikti. You see him. Boti ngal tsea. Tomorrow we will find it. Run au ngal drei tsati. The hunter hunts the yerig. Daron yerikti daron yul. So I think you get the idea. I also try to mix up the word orders a bit, and I will in general try to mix up word orders during these videos, because you always have to look at the case endings, not the word order. In Natvi, the case endings matter. There are cases where word order actually matters, but at the moment we are not looking at those yet. For the moment, fully focus on the case endings. So now we saw how the theory looks when used in practice. Unfortunately, we have to talk about a bit more grammar theory, namely verb transitivity. In dictionaries, each verb is categorized as VIN or VTR. Maybe you already saw that, maybe not, but it is important. It is really important. For example, if you look up taron in Reikunyu, you see the VTR there. You also see it if you look it up in Fueo, or Dignatvi, or the Entire Dictionary, or the Verb Dictionary. So all dictionaries do this. They always say that taron is VTR. If we now look instead at hahau, you see that again all the dictionaries instead write VIN. So what does that mean? VTR is short for transitive verb, so V, verb, TR, transitive. What does that mean? It can be used in transitive sentences. Transitive sentences are sentences with a direct object. So those are the sentences that have a T ending in them, so a noun with a T ending. So the sentences that we looked at just 2 slides ago are all transitive because they all have a noun with a T ending in them. They all have a direct object in them. This means a transitive sentence has L and T case endings, so transitive verbs can use L and T case endings. So it can kind of assign L and T case endings to a noun. But it can also be used in intransitive sentences. What are intransitive sentences, you might ask? Well, those are the sentences that we looked at the very beginning. Do you remember the oe dual and the nantang chip dual and so on? Those were all intransitive sentences, so sentences without a direct object. Maybe you already asked yourself, hey, why did we put the L ending on the sentences we recently did, but why did we not put the L ending in the oe dual? Well, because in intransitive sentences we do not use L and T. That means if there's no direct object, no T, then we also don't put the L ending on the subject. Basically, we have 2 different types of subjects. We have a subject without the L, which is the subject of an intransitive sentence, so a sentence without a T case ending. And we have a transitive subject, so a subject with the L ending that appears together with a T ending, so together with a direct object. For example, yom is indeed transitive. It's a transitive verb, but we can still say oe yom without the L ending, because in this case we just say I eat. We don't talk about what we are eating. If I now talk about what I'm eating, then I would put the L ending. I eat the fruit. Well, mau titi yom. So now the oe receives an L ending because there's also a T ending. By the way, the L ending always appearing with a T ending is not 100% true. There are sentences where there's either only an L ending or T ending, and then usually the other is kind of there but hidden. Imagine, for example, the situation that I made muffins and my boyfriend knows about these muffins and he comes home, but suddenly all the muffins are gone. And then he asks me what happened to the muffins and I say, well, yum, I ate. In English, we would usually then translate it as I ate them. I can leave out the them in Natvi, but I still would use the L ending there, would still say, well, yum, because I'm talking about the muffins. So the muffins are kind of there in the sentence, just left out, hidden. So there is a T ending, but hidden. But a completely different situation if my boyfriend would ask me, oh, what did you do today? And I would say, oe yom, I ate. Then I don't use the L ending because there's an intransitive sentence. There is no hidden T there. There is no direct object there. I'm not talking about what I'm eating. I'm only talking about the fact that I eat. So this is transitive. Let's look at intransitive verbs. So VIN, you probably already thought so, stands for verb intransitive. And those are verbs that can never be used in transitive sentences. So they can never have a direct object because, remember, transitive sentence means it's a sentence with a direct object. They can only ever be used in intransitive sentences. And what that means is it cannot have a direct object and it can never use L and T endings. Because remember, in intransitive sentences, so in sentences without a direct object, we do not put the L ending on the subject, on the person doing something. So if an intransitive verb can only be used in intransitive sentences, that means that the subject will never get an L ending together with that verb. It also means that we never put a T ending because it cannot have a direct object. It can use other case endings though. So you will learn about more case endings in the future. And a verb being intransitive really only means that it can never have L and T case endings. So it can never assign L and T case endings to a noun. It has nothing to do with other case endings or any other grammar stuff. I see this misconception a lot that people are like, oh, I cannot use the topical or the Ru case ending with this verb because it's intransitive. That is a wrong assumption. Transitivity is really only about L and T, subject and direct object. But you will learn more about other case endings in the future. You need to actually learn verb transitivity. Very often it aligns with English. For example, to eat is transitive in English. I eat the fruit, and it's also transitive in Natvi. So you see, I used it transitively with the L and T case endings there. But sometimes Natvi and English just use different structures to express the same ideas. A verb that is transitive in English might be intransitive in Natvi. The most common named example is nume, which means to learn. That is transitive in English because I learn the language. There's a direct object. What do I learn? The language. But in Natvi, it's intransitive, so you cannot use it with LNT. The Natvi literally actually say something like, regarding the language, I gain knowledge. So nume actually means something like to gain knowledge. So the Natvi use the intransitive sentence structure here, and nume is intransitive and cannot use LNT. So you need to learn by heart if a verb is transitive or intransitive. Always when you learn a new verb, look it up in the dictionary to see if it's transitive or intransitive. One tip I have for you is that all C verbs are intransitive. C verbs are verbs like the one that you already saw on the very first slide, the srong si, to help. So it has two parts, the srong, which is noun, and the si, which is the C part, the verbal part. There are many of these. There are really a lot of these types of verbs that end with the C. And all these verbs that end with a C are intransitive. That as a small tip. Let's talk about one more verb, namely lu. If you look it up in Fueo, you see this. BM is R and it's intransitive. But if you look it up in Reikunyu, you see this. VCP. What is that? This means it's a copular verb. Let's look at an English sentence. I am a beginner. The am here does one thing. It connects the I to the beginner. It is basically an equal sign. I equal beginner. And it does the same in Natvi. Oe lusngeyu. What you see here is we have two nouns, or actually one pronoun, the oe, and one noun, the sngeyu, so the I and the beginner, and they both don't have case endings. This usually doesn't work. So in most cases, you cannot just randomly put multiple nouns and pronouns in a sentence and all have no case ending, because then there is confusion which noun has which role. So usually you need to mark nouns and need to show, oh, this is the object, this is the indirect object, this is the topical, this one gets an adposition. So usually you have to mark nouns or most of the nouns in the sentence, but lu can connect two nouns without a case ending. So you never use LNT with lu because it's intransitive. You can use other case endings with lu, but for such simple sentences, where you just say something equals something else, you don't use any case ending. You can also use lu to connect a noun to an adjective. For example, the flower is blue. Luean shulang. This can also be done by some other verbs. For example, let's look at an example with efu. The dog is hungry. Ohak efu nantang chip. Note that in English we use is here, so also to be. In that we use efu to feel because we say that the dog actually feels hungry. You will learn more about this in the vocab video, which comes after this one. Let's look at one more example with a different verb. Loak becomes a hunter. Daron you loak slu. So slu can do the same. It can connect two nouns without any case endings. It's also a copular verb. Only Reikunyu actually specifically marks copular verbs, and I think also not all of them. I just wanted to add the slide, so in case you use Reikunyu, you don't get confused by this VCP. All it means is really this: you can connect things with each other without case endings. Note that efu actually is a transitive verb, so if you use it together with two nouns, you would still use LNT. But it also additionally can also connect a noun with an adjective like we did in the dog is hungry. So let's review the key points of this lesson. Natvi has flexible word order, verbs don't change depending on the subject, and there are no articles. Those are the main differences between English and Natvi grammar in simple sentences as we saw today. Since we have flexible word order cannot tell us who does what in the sentence. So instead we use case endings to mark the role a noun plays in the sentence. Remember, case endings only go ever on nouns and pronouns, never on verbs, never on any other type of word. This is really important. Natvi is very strict with word types. So you have to treat a noun like a noun, you have to treat a verb like a verb, and so on. Intransitive sentences, so those are sentences that have a direct object. L marks the subject, so the person doing something, or the thing doing something, the thing doing the action. And T marks the direct object, so the thing being verbed, kind of, the thing being directly affected by the action. In intransitive sentences, so sentences without the direct object, the subject is not marked, so you don't use an L ending here. Only transitive verbs can be used in transitive sentences, so only transitive verbs can use those two case endings. Transitivity of a verb needs to be learned, so while very often it is the same as in English, you should always look it up in the dictionary just to be sure, and maybe make some flashcards and actually learn by heart if a verb is transitive or intransitive. All C verbs are intransitive, so that's a good tip when you're learning verb transitivity. Some verbs can connect two nouns without case endings or a noun and an adjective. Those are copular verbs and they are marked as VCP in recunio. Other dictionaries don't really mark them. And that was it. Du se baum ngarusra, ne ye baum. So if you have any questions, just ask. You can reach me on Discord, via email, or you can just write a comment. I sometimes forget that my YouTube channel exists, so sometimes I just don't look at comments for a very long time. I always reply very quickly on Discord and via email, but I will try to get better with answering comments. I'm really sorry about that. But just that you know, if you write a comment and I don't answer, I just literally forgot that I have a YouTube channel. If you want to continue with this course, then you can find Listening 2.1 there. This is the next vocab video. If you are just here for the grammar, then you can go to the indirect object ru, which is the third grammar video. This video might not be out yet if you watch this video exactly now when it releases. Hi, jadowaj ma frapo.